morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Busan as Hannah Kim stepped onto her front porch. She held a steaming cup of coffee and watched the golden grain sway in the gentle breeze. After 15 years of military service, these quiet moments still felt like a luxury. The peaceful colony world was everything Earth had promised when the first settlers arrived 20 years ago. "Sister, come look at this," called Tay from inside the house. Her younger brother's voice carried the excitement that always came with his scientific discoveries. Hannah smiled and walked back into their modest home. Tay stood hunched over his workstation, his dark hair falling across his eyes as he peered into a microscope. At 28, he was already one of the colony's most respected xenobiologists. His research on New Busan's unique plant life had earned recognition from universities across human space. "What did you find now?" Hannah asked, setting down her coffee and moving to look over his shoulder. "The root systems," Tay said, his voice filled with wonder. "They're not just connected underground, they're actually sharing information through chemical signals. The entire field is like one giant brain." Hannah nodded, even though she only half understood his work. Science had never been her strength. She was better with weapons and tactics, skills that seemed unnecessary on this peaceful world. "That's amazing, Tay. Will this help the harvest?" "It could revolutionize farming across the galaxy," he said, finally looking up at her with bright eyes. "If we can understand how these plants communicate, we might be able to create crops that work together instead of competing for nutrients." Before Hannah could respond, a deep rumble shook the house. The coffee mug rattled on the table, and both siblings looked toward the window. The sky had darkened, though it was still early morning. "What was that?" she asked, his excitement replaced by concern. Hannah's military instincts kicked in immediately. She recognized that sound from her years in the Earth Defense Force. "Ships," she said grimly. "Big ones." They rushed outside and looked up at the sky. 3 massive vessels hung in the atmosphere above New Busan's main settlement. Each ship was easily 5 kilometers long, their dark hulls gleaming like polished obsidian. Strange lights pulsed along their surfaces in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Are those human ships?" Tay asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Hannah said, her hand instinctively moving to where her sidearm would have been during her military days. "Those are alien." Other colonists emerged from their homes, pointing at the sky and talking in worried voices. Children cried while their parents tried to calm them. The peaceful morning had turned into something from a nightmare. A new sound filled the air, like crystal chimes mixed with electronic static. Then a voice spoke, though it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Okay." The words were in perfect standard English, but the tone was cold and mechanical. "Inhabitants of this world," the voice announced. "We are the Vorthan hegemony. You will comply with our requirements or face the consequences of resistance." Hannah felt ice form in her stomach. She had heard stories about the Vortans during her military service, though most officers dismissed them as rumors from the Outer Rim. Reports described them as a powerful alien empire that viewed other species as resources to be harvested. "We require tribute from this colony," the voice continued. "You will provide us with your most capable minds for our research programs. Those selected will contribute to the advancement of civilization across the galaxy." Mayor Cho's voice crackled over the colony's communication system. "This is Mayor Cho of New Busan Colony. We are a peaceful settlement under the protection of the Earth Defense Force. We demand that you leave our space immediately." The alien response was swift and terrifying. One of the massive ships fired a beam of blue energy at the colony's main power plant. The building simply vanished, leaving nothing but a perfectly circular crater where it had stood moments before. "Your compliance is not optional," the Vorting voice said. "You will select the individuals we require." Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of this world. Smaller ships began emerging from the massive vessels, each one the size of a commercial transport. They moved with impossible grace, defying the laws of physics as Hannah understood them. The craft settled around the colony's main settlement like predators surrounding prey. Hannah, Tay said quietly, "We need to run." Tay knew there was nowhere to go. The Vordens had orbital superiority and technology far beyond anything humans possessed. Running would only delay the inevitable. The smaller ships began disgorging their occupants. The Vorthings were tall, easily 3 meters in height, with bodies that seemed to be made of living crystal. They moved with mechanical precision, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy as they walked. Each one carried devices that hummed with power. Citizens of New Busan, Mayor Cho's voice came over the speakers again, but now it shook with fear. "Please remain calm and cooperate with our visitors, okay? We are attempting to negotiate a peaceful resolution." Thorntons began moving through the settlement, scanning the colonists with their strange devices. Hannah watched in horror as they separated. Families, pointing at certain individuals and speaking in their crystalline language. "They're taking the scientists," Tay observed. "The doctors, the engineers, the teachers. Anyone with advanced knowledge." Hannah's blood ran cold as she realized what that meant. His reputation as a brilliant researcher would make him a prime target. "We need to hide you," she said, grabbing his arm. But it was too late. 3 Vortons approached their house, their crystal forms shifting colors as they moved. The lead alien raised a device that projected a holographic display showing Tay's research papers and academic records. "Subject identified," it said in that same cold voice. "Xenobiologist Tay Kim. Research specialty, plant communication systems. Value, high. Selection, confirmed." "No." Hannah stepped in front of her brother. "He's not going anywhere with you." The Vorthon tilted his head, studying her with eyes that looked like faceted gems. "Resistance is illogical. Your species lacks the capability to oppose us. Stand aside, Kami," Hannah said, her military training taking over. She had faced down terrorists and pirates during her service years. She would not be intimidated by these crystal freaks. The alien raised its weapon, but Tay stepped around his sister before it could fire. "Wait," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "If I come with you willingly, will you leave the others alone?" The Vorthon paused, its form flickering. "Cooperation is preferable to resistance. Compliance will result in minimal casualties." "Tay, no." Hannah grabbed his arm. "We'll find another way." Her brother looked at her with sad eyes. "There is no other way, sister. Look around us." Double quotes. Hannah did look. Throughout the settlement, the Vorthons were loading selected colonists onto their ships. Okay? Those who resisted were simply stunned and carried aboard unconscious. The aliens showed no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. "If I fight them, people will die," Tay said quietly. "If I go willingly, maybe they'll keep their word." "I won't let them take you," Hannah said, her voice breaking. Tay hugged her tight. "You taught me to be brave, sister. Now, let me prove I learned the lesson." Before Hannah could stop him, Tay stepped toward the waiting Vorthons. They immediately surrounded him, their crystal forms pulsing with satisfied energy. "Hey!" Hannah lunged forward. But one of the aliens raised his weapon and fired a stun beam. Pain shot through her body as she collapsed to the ground. Paralyzed, but still conscious, she could only watch helplessly as they led her brother toward their transport ship. Other colonists were being loaded as well, their families crying and begging for their return. The lead Vorthon looked down at Hannah with his crystalline eyes. "Your brother will serve a greater purpose. His knowledge will advance our understanding of organic consciousness. You should be honored. I'll kill you," Hannah whispered through clenched teeth. I'll find you and I'll kill every last one of you. The alien's form flickered in what might have been amusement. Primitive threats from primitive beings. Your species will learn to accept their place in the natural order. The Vorthians boarded their ships with their human cargo. Hannah watched the transports lift off and disappear into the larger vessels above. Within minutes, the massive ships were gone, leaving only empty sky and devastated families. As the stun effect wore off, Hannah struggled to her feet. Around her, the colonists were gathering their injured and counting their losses. 53 people had been taken, including the colony's best and brightest minds. Hannah looked up at the empty sky where her brother had disappeared. The Vorthians had made a mistake. They had taken the one person in the galaxy she would do anything to protect. They thought humans were primitive and weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were, standing in the ruins of her peaceful life. Hannah Kim made a promise that would echo across the stars. She would find her brother. She would bring him home. And if the Vorthings stood in her way, she would tear their empire apart piece by piece. The war had begun, though only one side knew it yet. 6 months had passed since the Vorthins took Tay, and Hannah Kim was no longer the same person. The peaceful colony administrator was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. She stood in the cargo bay of an abandoned Earth Defense Force outpost, checking her equipment one final time. "Are you sure about this?" asked June, the former Special Forces soldier who had become her closest ally. His weathered face showed concern as he watched her prepare for their most dangerous mission yet. "They have my brother," Hannah replied, her voice cold as space. "I'm sure." The outpost floated in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system, forgotten by the military after budget cuts 5 years ago. Hannah had used her old command codes to access it, turning the empty facility into a base of operations. Over the months, she had gathered others like herself, people who had lost family to Vorthan raids. Mira looked up from her computer terminal, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. The tech specialist had lost her husband to the aliens 2 years ago and had spent every day since learning to hack their systems. "I've got the patrol schedules," she announced. "The research station will be lightly defended for the next 4 hours. Captain Wu grunted his approval from the pilot seat of their modified Corvette. The old spacer had converted his merchant vessel into a stealth ship after the Vorthins destroyed his trading post. His beard was gray and his hands were scarred, but his eyes burned with the same fury that drove them all. "Remember," Hannah said, addressing the small team, "we go in quiet, gather intelligence, and get out. We're not ready for a full assault yet." The Vorthan research station hung in orbit around a dead planet, its crystalline structure gleaming in the light of a distant star. It was smaller than their main facilities, but still massive by human standards. Strange energy patterns danced across its surface like living lightning. Sensors show minimal activity, Mira whispered as their ship approached. "Most of the station appears to be automated." They docked at a maintenance port that Mira had identified as having weak security. The airlock hissed open, revealing corridors that seemed to be carved from solid crystal. Everything glowed with a soft blue light that made their skin look pale and sickly. "I hate this place already," June muttered, checking his weapon for the 3rd time. They moved through the station like ghosts, following Myra's directions toward the main research labs. The corridors were empty except for floating maintenance drones that ignored their presence. The silence was broken only by the humming of alien machinery and the whisper of recycled air. "This way," Mira said, consulting her portable scanner. The human holding area should be just ahead. What they found made Hannah's blood freeze. Behind walls of transparent crystal, dozens of humans sat motionless in chairs connected to strange machines. Cables ran from their skulls to towering computers that pulsed with alien energy. Their eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. My God, Wu whispered. What are they doing to them? One of the prisoners suddenly moved, turning her head toward them. Hana gasped as she recognized the face. Jin. Hana pressed her hand against the crystal wall. Jin, can you hear me? Jin had been Hana's roommate at the military academy 15 years ago. They had lost touch after graduation, but Hana remembered her as brilliant and full of life. Now her friend's face was pale, and her movements were slow and mechanical. Jin's lips moved, but no sound came through the crystal barrier. Mira quickly found the control panel and began working on it with her tools. I can override the containment field, she said, but it might trigger an alarm. Do it, Hana ordered. The crystal wall shimmered and disappeared. Jin stumbled forward, nearly falling before Hana caught her. Her friend's skin was cold, and her eyes struggled to focus. Hana, Jin's voice was barely a whisper. Is it really you? We're getting you out of here, Hana said, supporting Jin's. Wait, no. Jin shook her head weakly. Too dangerous. They'll know. They always know. What are they doing to you people? Jun asked, his weapon trained on the empty corridor. Jin's eyes cleared slightly, and for a moment she looked like her old self. They're studying us, learning how we think, how we feel. They want to understand human consciousness. Why? Hana demanded. They're afraid, Jin said, her voice growing stronger. Something is coming. Something that hunts consciousness itself. They think human minds might be the key to survival. Before Hana could ask more questions, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and the humming of machinery grew louder. Intruder alert, announced a cold, war-throned voice. Security protocols activated. Time to go, Captain. Wu said over there, come system. I've got 3 patrol ships incoming fast. They ran through the twisting corridors as the station came alive around them. Crystalline barriers slammed down to block their path, forcing them to take longer routes. Security drones emerged from hidden panels, firing beams of energy that left scorch marks on the walls. This way, Myra shouted, leading them through a service tunnel barely wide enough for humans. Jin stumbled and fell, her weak legs unable to keep up. Jun swept her up in his arms without breaking stride, his military training showing as he carried her. Effortlessly, they reached their ship just as the first Forthon patrol vessel rounded the station. Captain Wu had the engines ready, and they blasted away from the docking port with seconds to spare. Hang on, Wu called out as he threw the ship into a steep dive toward the planet below. The Vorthan ships followed, their sleek forms cutting through space like knives. Energy beams lanced past their hull, coming closer with each shot. The alien computers were calculating their flight path, predicting where they would go next. They're too fast, Mira said, watching the tactical display. Their targeting systems are locking onto us. That was when Hana did something the Vorthan computers could never have predicted. Instead of following logical, evasive patterns, she took manual control and flew straight toward the largest enemy ship. What are you doing? Jun yelled. Something stupid, Hana replied, her hand steady on the controls. The Vorthan ship tried to adjust its course, but its computer brain couldn't process the illogical human behavior fast enough. At the last second, Hana pulled up and over the alien vessel, using its own bulk to shield them from the other attackers. She then dove toward the planet's surface, skimming so close to the ground that their hull scraped against mountain peaks. The Vorthans followed, but their larger ships couldn't match the crazy maneuvers that Hana pulled off through pure instinct and desperation. Impossible. One of the alien pilots transmitted on an open channel. These flight patterns make no tactical sense. That's the point, Hana muttered, spinning their ship through a narrow canyon that no sane pilot would attempt. They lost to pursuit in a maze of underground caverns, finally emerging on the far side of the planet where Captain Wu engaged their stealth systems. The Vorthan ships searched for hours, but eventually gave up and returned to the station. Back at their hidden base, Jin sat in the medical bay while Mira ran tests on the alien technology that had been connected to her brain. Despite her ordeal, Jin was eager to share what she had learned during her captivity. The Vorthans aren't the real enemy, she explained, her voice growing stronger as the alien influence faded from her system. They're running from something called the Void Hunters. These things consume consciousness itself, leaving nothing but empty shells behind. They're experimenting on humans to find a weapon, Hannah asked. Not a weapon, Jin corrected. An evolution. They think that by combining human creativity with their computational power, they can create something the Void Hunters can't destroy. Hannah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Where is my brother? Where are they keeping the most important prisoners? Jin's face grew pale. The Nexus Forge is their primary research facility, hidden in the core systems of their empire. Okay? If Tay is as brilliant as you say he is, that's where they took him. Then that's where we're going, Hannah said with quiet determination. It's impossible, Jin protested. The Nexus Forge is surrounded by the entire Vordon battle fleet. No human ship has ever gotten within a light year of it. Hannah looked at her small team of misfits and outcasts. It's June with his special forces, training Mira with her technical genius, Captain Wu with his decades of experience. Okay, and now Jin with her inside knowledge of Vorthing operations. Maybe no human ship has tried the right approach, she said. The Vortons think we're primitive and predictable. They expect us to follow logical patterns. What are you suggesting? Jun asked. We stop trying to think like them, Hannah replied. We embrace what makes us human. Our chaos, our unpredictability, our willingness to do impossible things for the people we love. She looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, her brother was being held prisoner. The rescue mission she had planned was growing into something larger, something that might change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Vorthans had made a mistake when they took Tay. Kim. They had awakened something in his sister that they couldn't calculate or predict. Hannah was no longer just trying to save one person. She was preparing to show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they fought for something greater than themselves. The real war was about to begin. 3 months after the research station raid, Hannah Kim stood before a holographic display showing star maps across human space. Red dots marked colonies that had been raided by the Vorthans. There were far more than she had imagined. 7 worlds attacked in the past 2 years, reported Commander Sung, the former Earth Defense Force officer who had joined their growing resistance. His tactical mind had been invaluable in planning their operations. Over 3,000 people taken. Hidden Base had grown from a handful of refugees to a bustling command center. Word of their successful raid had spread through secret channels, bringing volunteers from across human space, families who had lost loved ones, former military personnel seeking purpose, and civilians who refused to live in fear. The pattern is clear, Mira said, manipulating the holographic display to show shipping routes and trade lanes. They're targeting specific types of people: scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, anyone with knowledge they consider valuable. Hannah nodded grimly. The Vorthans were building something with human minds, and every day they delayed meant more people suffered the same fate as Tay. Ma'am, called Captain Yell from across the room. The former mining foreman had arrived 2 weeks ago with a convoy of modified asteroid processors. We've got an incoming transmission on the emergency frequency. The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of Dr. Park. The terraforming engineer had been coordinating resistance cells on the outer rim colonies. Her usually calm expression was tight with worry. Hannah, we have a problem, Dr. Park said without preamble. The Vorthans are planning something big. Our contacts in the merchant fleet report massive ship movements toward the core systems. How massive? Commander Sung asked, his military bearing taking over. At least 50 capital ships, plus hundreds of smaller vessels, intelligence suggests. They're preparing for a major operation. Jin stepped forward, her recovery from Vorthan experimentation nearly complete. That sounds like a harvesting fleet. They only deployed that many ships when they planned to take entire populations. Which colonies are in their path? Kenna demanded. Dr. Park's image flickered as the transmission struggled through the encrypted channels. New Seoul, Busan Station, and the Taegu system. Nearly 2 million people. The command center fell silent. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. The Vorthans had been taking dozens or hundreds of people from each raid. Now, they were planning to take thousands. Have to warn them, Jun said, his scarred hands clenching into fists. A warning won't be enough, Commander Sung replied coldly. The colonies don't have the firepower to resist a fleet that size. They'll surrender or be destroyed. Anna stared at the star map, her mind racing through possibilities. A conventional attack against 50 Vorthan warships would be suicide. But maybe they didn't need to fight the entire fleet. What if we don't attack the fleet directly? She said, slowly. What if we attack their supply lines instead? Ira looked up from her computer terminal, understanding immediately. Hit their logistics. No army can fight without supplies, not even the Vorthans. Exactly. Hannah turned to address the room. We've been thinking too small. Instead of one ship hitting one target, we coordinate multiple strikes across multiple systems. Force them to spread their forces thin. Captain Wu stroked his gray beard. Thoughtfully, it could work, but we'd need more ships, more people. Then we get them, Hannah said with determination. It's time to stop hiding and start building a real resistance network. Over the next week, Hannah sent messages to every human, colony, trading post, and military outpost within 50 light years. The response was overwhelming. People were tired of living in fear, tired of watching their loved ones disappear into Vorthan ships. Captain Lee arrived from the New Jeju mining consortium with a fleet of converted ore haulers. Their industrial equipment had been modified into weapons that could crack open asteroid holes or enemy armor with equal effectiveness. Commander Ru brought a squadron of decommissioned patrol boats from the Earth Defense Force surplus yards. The ships were old, but still functional, and their crews were veterans who knew how to fight. Most importantly, Dr. Choi came with something the resistance desperately needed: intelligence. The former government researcher had spent years studying Vorthan technology and tactics. Her data files contained detailed information about their ship designs, weapon systems, and operational procedures. Their biggest weakness is predictability, Dr. Choi explained during a strategy briefing. Vorthan battle computers rely on mathematical models to predict enemy behavior. They assume all opponents will act logically. But humans don't always act logically, Commander Sung observed with a slight smile. Exactly. Emotion, intuition, desperation, love. These things don't fit into their calculations. That's why your previous mission succeeded. Hannah studied the tactical displays showing Vorthan patrol routes and supply convoys. So we hit them where they don't expect it, when they don't expect it, using methods they can't predict. The plan that emerged was ambitious beyond anything they had attempted before. 7 simultaneous strikes across 4 star systems, targeting supply depots, communication relays, and transport convoys. Each attack would use different tactics and ship configurations to prevent the Vorthians from developing countermeasures. Captain Yol will lead his mining ships against the fuel depot at Kepler Station. Their industrial cutters could slice through Vorthan armor like paper, and their bulk haulers could carry enough explosives to level the entire facility. Commander Ru's patrol squadron would hit the communication array in the Vega system, fast, hit-and-run attacks using human intuition instead of computer-guided targeting systems. Dr. Park coordinated with resistance cells on a dozen worlds to launch coordinated sabotage operations. Humans working inside Vorthon facilities would strike at the same moment, creating chaos across their supply network. Remember, Hannah addressed the assembled fleet commanders via holographic conference. This isn't about winning battles. It's about proving that humans won't surrender quietly. Every successful strike brings more people to our cause. The attacks launched simultaneously across human space. Hannah led the assault on a major supply convoy in the Ross system, her ship dancing between massive warthine transports like a fighter pilot in an old war movie. Target the lead ship's engines, she called out to June, who manned their weapons console. That's not tactically sound, came the response from the Vorthan convoy commander. Your small vessel cannot significantly damage our primary transport. Okay, watch me, Hannah muttered, diving her ship beneath the massive alien vessel and firing directly into its engine ports. The transport shuddered and began listing to one side, its crystalline hull cracking under the unexpected stress. Other human ships swarmed around the convoy like angry wasps. Their unpredictable attack patterns confusing the Vorthan defensive computers. Within 30 minutes, the convoy was scattered wreckage, drifting in space. Akana, the aliens had lost 5 transport ships and their cargo without destroying a single human vessel. Similar stories came in from the other strike teams. Captain Yule's miners had turned the Kepler fuel depot into an expanding cloud of plasma. Commander Rue's squadron had disabled the Vega communication array using a tactic that involved ramming one of their own ships into the station at precisely the right angle to cause a cascade failure. But the real victory came from the psychological impact. News of the coordinated attacks spread through both human and Vorthan space like wildfire. Humans saw that resistance was possible, while the Vorthans faced something they had never encountered before, an enemy that couldn't be calculated or predicted. Possible, transmitted the Vorthan fleet commander whose convoy Hannah had destroyed. These tactics violate all principles of logical warfare. Logic is overrated, Hannah replied before cutting the channel. Back at their hidden base, the command center buzzed with activity as reports continued to arrive. The resistance network had grown from a few dozen people to several thousand in a matter of weeks. More importantly, they had captured enough Orcs technology to begin serious reverse engineering efforts. Mira worked with a team of human engineers to understand alien power systems and weapons. Their hybrid designs combined Vorthan efficiency with human creativity, producing tools that neither species could have developed alone. The quantum resonance patterns are fascinating, Dr. Choi explained as she examined a captured Orthone power core. If we can adapt this technology to human neural patterns, we might be able to create communication systems that work faster than THR, than THS. The quantum resonance patterns are fascinating. Now, Dr. Choi explained as she examined a 6 as NTs, which is NTs. If we went to my 1, we want, we said, which is where we said you, as we said, we is, we I, we may us, I. Light. Jen nodded, her experience with Vorthan brain interface technology proving invaluable. The aliens think in terms of collective consciousness. They can't understand individual creativity. That's our advantage. As reports of their success spread, something unexpected happened. The Vorthans began changing their tactics. Fleet movements became less predictable. Supply routes were altered without apparent logic. Security was increased at facilities that had never been attacked. They're learning from us, Commander Sung observed during a strategy meeting. Adapting their behavior to become more unpredictable. Good, Hannah said, surprising everyone in the room. That means we're forcing them to become more human. The alarm klaxons screamed through the hidden base as Mira's fingers flew across her console. Her face was pale with shock as she stared at the incoming sensor data. Hannah, you need to see this, she called out, her voice barely steady. Hannah rushed to the main display, followed by Commander Sung and the other senior staff. What she saw made her blood freeze. A massive object was moving through space toward the new Sol system, so large that it showed up on sensors from 3 star systems away. What is that thing? Captain Wu asked, his weathered face creased with worry. Jin stepped forward, her face going white as she recognized the energy signatures. It's the planet Scorcher. It's the Vorthian's ultimate weapon. How big? Commander Sung demanded, his tactical mind already working on the problem. The size of Earth's moon, Jin whispered. It can sterilize an entire world in hours. Dr. Choi pulled up technical data on her screens, her hands shaking slightly. Intelligence reports suggest it's powered by a contained singularity energy. Output is beyond anything humans have ever built. Hannah stared at the massive vessel as it moved inexorably toward New Sol, home to 12 million people. The Vorthian response to their resistance was swift and brutal. They were going to make an example that would terrify every human colony into submission. We have to evacuate the planet, Captain Yule said. Get as many people off as possible. Isn't time? Commander Sung replied grimly. That thing will reach New Sol in 18 hours. We'd need 1,000 transport ships to evacuate even a fraction of the population. Then we stop it, Hannah said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Cana's Scorcher was protected by the most advanced shields in the galaxy and armed with weapons that could destroy capital ships with single shots. Their entire resistance fleet wouldn't even scratch its surface. Kana, June said gently. It's impossible. You don't have the firepower. Maybe we don't need firepower, she replied, her mind racing through possibilities. Jen, you said the Vortons are keeping their most valuable human prisoners on their most important ships. Jen nodded slowly, understanding where Hannah's thoughts were leading. The planet Scorcher would be the perfect place to conduct their most critical experiments. Maximum security, unlimited power for their equipment. So Tay might be on that ship, Hannah said, her voice hardening with determination. Even if he is, Dr. Park's image flickered on the communication screen from her distant outpost. You can't possibly board that thing. It's suicide. Hannah looked around the command center at her allies. These people had followed her this far because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Now she was asking them to attempt the impossible. Planet Scorcher is focused on destroying New Sol, she said slowly. All their attention will be on the orbital bombardment. They won't expect a boarding party during the attack. That's insane, Captain Rue protested. You want to infiltrate their most powerful weapon while it's actively destroying a planet? Exactly the kind of insane thing they won't predict, Commander Sung said thoughtfully. Their computers will calculate that no rational being would attempt such a mission. Myra looked up from her console where she had been analyzing the planet Scorcher's design. I have found something. There are maintenance ports along the ship's equator. Designed for automated repair drones, but a small human team could fit through them. The radiation from the main weapon will be lethal, Dr. Choi warned. Anyone on that ship during the bombardment will be exposed to energies that would kill them in minutes. Then we wear radiation suits, Hannah said. We go in fast, find the prisoners, and get out before the exposure kills us. Still suicide, June said, but his tone suggested he was already preparing for the mission. Maybe, Hannah agreed. But if we do nothing, 12 million people die and the resistance ends. If we try this, maybe we save them and deal a blow the Vorthans will never recover from. The next 16 hours were a blur of preparation. Their fastest ship was modified with stealth systems and radiation shielding. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Most importantly, Jin worked with Dr. Choi to analyze the planet Scorcher's internal layout. The main laboratories will be in the central core, Jin explained, pointing to holographic schematics. Maximum protection from external threats, direct access to the ship's power systems. How do we find Tae among potentially thousands of prisoners? Commander Sung asked. We followed the power signatures, Mira replied. The most important experiments will draw the most energy. They're doing something special with Tae's mind. It'll show up on our scanners. As the planet Scorcher approached New Seoul, the Resistance fleet took position at the edge of the system. Most of their ships would create a distraction, drawing Vorthing attention away from the boarding party. Remember, Hannah addressed her team over the comm system. We're not trying to destroy this thing. We're trying to save lives and gather intelligence. Get in, find the prisoners, and get out. The planet Scorcher was even more terrifying up close. Its surface was covered with crystalline structures that pulsed with deadly energy. Weapon ports, the size of city blocks, tracked across New Seoul's surface as the massive ship took position for bombardment. Beginning atmospheric entry, Captain Wu reported as he piloted their stealth ship toward one of the maintenance ports. K. Radiation levels are already spiking. K. The ship shuddered as they passed through the planet Scorcher shields. Warning. Lights flashed on their control panels as systems strained against electromagnetic interference from the alien weapon systems. There, Myra pointed to a dark opening in the crystalline hull. Maintenance Port 7. It's our best option. Tae docked with barely meters to spare as Vorthing patrol drones swept past their position. The boarding party consisted of Hannah, June, Mira, and Jin. For people against the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. The interior of the planet Scorcher was like nothing they had ever seen. Corridors stretched 4 kilometers in every direction, filled with conduits carrying energy that could power entire star systems. The air hummed with barely contained power. This way, Jin led them through passages that seemed to shift and change as they moved. The central core should be about 2 kilometers ahead. They encountered surprisingly few guards. Most of the ship's crew was focused on the bombardment operation, leaving the internal areas lightly defended. The few Vorthing security drones they met were quickly disabled by June's modified weapons. I'm picking up massive power signatures ahead, Mira reported, checking her scanner. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing more energy than a small city. They emerged onto a platform overlooking the central laboratory. Below them stretched a vast chamber filled with thousands of humans connected to a single, massive crystalline matrix. Energy flowed between the organic minds and the alien computer in patterns too complex for human understanding. The Genesis chamber, Jin whispered in horror. They're trying to merge human consciousness with their collective intelligence. Hannah scanned the chamber below, searching for any sign of her brother. The prisoners all looked the same, pale and motionless, in their restraint chairs. But one figure drew her attention, a man whose posture seemed familiar even in unconsciousness. Tae, she breathed. Her brother sat in the center of the chamber, more cables connecting him to the alien matrix than any other prisoner. Energy patterns flowed around him like living lightning, and his body occasionally twitched as if responding to signals from the machine. He's not just a test subject, Jin realized. It's become some kind of interface between human and Vorthing consciousness. Before they could plan their next move, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The bombardment of New Seoul had begun, and the planet Scorcher's weapons were charging to full power. Radiation levels are spiking, Myra warned. We have maybe 10 minutes before this becomes lethal. They rappelled down into the chamber, moving quickly between the rows of imprisoned humans. Up close, Hannah could see that her brother was still alive, but deeply unconscious. The alien technology had changed him somehow, making him a bridge between two different forms of consciousness. Hannah Tay's eyes suddenly opened, though his voice sounded strange and distant. "You came for me." "Of course I did," she said, working to disconnect the cables from his skull. "We're getting you out of here." "No," Tay said, his hand catching hers. "I can't leave. If I disconnect now, the integration will fail, and all these people will die." "What integration?" June demanded, keeping watch for security forces. "The Vorthans aren't evil," Tay explained, his voice carrying an odd harmony as if multiple minds were speaking. "They're terrified. The Void Hunters are coming, and only a merged consciousness can survive them." "Then we'll find another way," Hannah said firmly. "I'm not leaving you here." Sister Tay smiled sadly. "Sometimes the greatest love means letting go. I've learned something in here, something that could save both our species." The ship shuddered as its main weapons reached full power. Through the chamber's transparent walls, they could see New Soul's surface beginning to glow under the bombardment. "The human mind isn't meant to be part of a collective," Tay continued, its consciousness clearly fighting against the alien influence. "But it can teach the collective to be individual." "Okay, I'm changing them, Hannah, making them more human." The alien thoughts crashed through Hannah's mind like a tidal wave. Millions of Vorthan voices spoke at once, their crystalline logic mixing with her human emotions in ways that should have driven her insane. But somehow, Tay's final gift held her consciousness together, teaching her how to navigate this strange hybrid awareness. "Hannah," June's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Stay with us." She opened her eyes to find herself still in the Genesis chamber, but everything had changed. The thousands of human prisoners were stirring in their restrained chairs, their eyes clearing as the alien influence weakened. Above them, Vorthon security forces had stopped their advance, standing motionless as conflicting signals coursed through their collective network. "Something's wrong with their command structure," Mira reported, checking her scanner. "The entire ship's computer system is fluctuating." Through her new connection to the Vorthon network, Hannah could feel the confusion spreading through their empire. Her brother's sacrifice had introduced something their logic could not process: the concept of willing self-sacrifice for others. It was creating cascade failures in their computational matrices across dozens of star systems. "We need to get out of here," Jin urged, helping free prisoners from their restraint chairs. "This ship is becoming unstable." But Hannah barely heard her. She was experiencing something no human had ever felt before: the collective consciousness of an entire alien civilization. Their fears, their ancient memories, their desperate flight from something that hunted them across the void between galaxies. "Void Hunters," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "They're not just coming, they're already here." On the edges of the galaxy, space itself was being consumed. Dark entities that existed between dimensions were draining the life from entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty shells where once vibrant civilizations had thrived. The Vorthans had been running from them for centuries, taking what they needed to survive. Kanatay's voice echoed in her mind, though she knew he was gone. "Show them what we can become together." She reached out through the network, touching the consciousness of every Vorthan in the Empire, instead of trying to dominate them with human thoughts. She offered them something they had never experienced: individual choice. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," she projected to them. "We can face this threat together." The response was immediate and chaotic. Some Vorthans rejected the alien concept of cooperation with inferior beings. Others embraced it with the desperate hope of those who had run out of options. The Empire began fracturing along lines of philosophy rather than logic. On the planet Scorcher, Supreme Commander Kethmer materialized in the Genesis chamber, his crystalline form flickering between solid matter and pure energy. His alien features were impossible to read, but Hannah could feel his confusion through their shared connection. "What have you done to us?" he demanded, his voice carrying harmonics that hurt human ears. "I've given you a choice," Hannah replied, standing to face him despite the weakness in her legs. "You can continue running from the Void Hunters alone and eventually lose, or you can work with us to find a solution." "Humans are inferior," Kethmer stated, but his words lacked the certainty they once carried. "Your chaotic thinking patterns are inefficient." "Our chaos is exactly what you need," Hannah countered. "Your perfect logic makes you predictable. The Void Hunters can calculate your every move, but they can't predict us." Through the network, she showed him images from the resistance battles, human ships dancing around Vorthon vessels in patterns that made no tactical sense but somehow worked. The impossible victories achieved through desperation, love, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. "Fascinating," Kethmer admitted reluctantly. "Your species approaches problems from angles our computers cannot model." "Then stop trying to model us," Hannah said. "Start trusting us." It was a concept that nearly broke the Vorthan commander's mind. Trust required faith in uncertain outcomes, something their logic-based culture had abandoned long ago. But as reports flooded in about Void Hunter activities in nearby galaxies, even perfect logic demanded they consider impossible solutions. Over the following days, transformations spread throughout both civilizations. Humans who had been prisoners found themselves working alongside their former captors to understand alien technology. Vorthans experienced individual consciousness for the first time, learning what it meant to have personal opinions and emotions. The process was not smooth. Many humans refused to forgive the aliens who had enslaved their families. Entire Vorthon collectives collapsed when exposed to human emotional chaos. But slowly, guided by the hybrid consciousness that Tay had created and Hannah now maintained, the two species began to merge into something new. Captain Wu found himself partnered with a Vorthan engineer, rehand their combined knowledge, creating ship designs that neither species could have imagined alone. Dr. Choi worked with alien scientists to develop weapons that operated on principles of controlled chaos rather than predictable patterns. "It's working," Jin reported from the command center that had once been a human resistance base and was now a joint operations facility. "The hybrid consciousness network is growing. We have volunteers from both species joining the merger." But their time was running short. The Void Hunters had detected the unusual energy signatures coming from the merger experiments. Dark ships began appearing at the edge of known space, their presence draining color from stars and leaving empty void in their wake. "They're coming," Han announced during a joint council meeting attended by both human commanders and Vortine collectives. "We have maybe weeks before they reach the core systems. Our conventional weapons are useless against them," admitted Nexus Prime Kethmer, who had evolved beyond his original programming through constant exposure to human consciousness. "They exist partially outside normal space-time. Then we use unconventional weapons," Commander Sung suggested, "something they can't predict or calculate." The solution came from an unexpected source. Kara, working with a team of hybrid human Vorthan consciousness, discovered that the merger process itself generated a type of energy that the Void Hunters couldn't absorb. Love, sacrifice, and cooperation created quantum resonances that existed outside their dimensional framework. "We can weaponize consciousness itself," she explained, her excitement shared simultaneously by dozens of linked minds. "Not individual thoughts, but the connections between them. It's the bonds that make us more than the sum of our parts." The final battle took place in the galactic core, where space-time was already weakened by ancient conflicts. The Void Hunter fleet emerged from dark space like living shadows, their very presence beginning to drain consciousness from nearby systems. The combined human Vorthan fleet met them with ships that defied conventional physics, Vessels powered by hybrid consciousness moved in patterns that followed emotional logic rather than mathematical precision. Their weapons fired bolts of pure cooperative energy that the Void Hunters could not absorb or deflect. "This is impossible," transmitted the lead Void Hunter, its voice like the death of stars. "Consciousness cannot be weaponized. It can only be consumed." "You're wrong," Hannah replied, through the network that now connected millions of beings across dozens of species. Consciousness shared willingly becomes stronger, not weaker. The battle raged for days, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Void Hunters were powerful beyond imagination, but they could not understand or counterattacks that came from love rather than logic. Every time they adapted to human chaos, force and precision surprised them. When they countered alien efficiency, human creativity found new approaches. The turning point came when Hannah realized they were fighting the wrong battle. Instead of trying to destroy the Void Hunters, they needed to offer them what they truly sought: connection. "Jess," she broadcast to the enemy fleet, "you're just lonely. You consume consciousness because you can't create it yourselves." The response was immediate and violent. The Void Hunters redoubled their attacks, trying to silence the voice that had seen through their ancient hunger. But Hannah persisted, protected by the combined will of two species united in purpose. "We can teach you," she continued. "Show you how to build consciousness instead of destroying it." Some of the Void Hunters rejected the offer, fleeing back to the dark spaces between galaxies. But others hesitated, drawn by the promise of something they had sought for eons without understanding. The war ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The Void Hunters who remained began the slow process of learning to create rather than consume. The hybrid human-Vorthan consciousness network expanded to include new forms of awareness that existed beyond physical reality. Years later, Hannah stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the joint capital of what was now called the Synthesis Alliance. Below her, representatives from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible for any one civilization to achieve alone. "Do you think Tay would be proud?" asked Kethmer, who now served as her co-administrator. The former Vorten commander had chosen to maintain individual consciousness while remaining connected to the collective network.